Great. I mean, I'm super excited to have on Talks with T, Ihsan Jawad, who's been in the ecosystem for 20 years in the tech ecosystem. When you said that, I kind of had to reflect. Has the tech ecosystem even been alive for 20 years? Today, general partner at STV, and prior to that, and probably most famously known for being the founder at Zawya. So thanks for spending some time on the show today.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be here.
So we were just briefly chatting before the show started. I was asking you, when you carve out that 20 years, do you think of yourself as a founder? Do you think of yourself as an investor?
I started as a founder, and it took me a good 5 to 6 years to transition from that role, and have kind of two hats on, tell you the truth, a founder hat and an investor hat, and those were tough years. And I think I would say I truly made that transition 2018, where I just decided to take off the founder hat. It's generally not a good thing to put two hats on. It's good to be single-minded, focused at least. Of course now, that has served me well because I can recollect experiences, obviously, from being a founder, and the tough times I had, the different challenges, sitting on the other side of the table, which do serve me now from time to time when I'm talking to entrepreneurs.
I imagine it's a huge USP you have as an investor, being a founder, because sometimes when a person would sit down with investors, you may get feedback, but it's feedback around how to make the business look more attractive or more commercially viable for an investor to look at it. And it's very rare in this part of the world to get feedback around ways to think about running your business more effectively. And I think it's just the natural evolution of the ecosystem, which is there's a handful of people who've gone through scaling, exiting, and now investing.
True.
Right? And so I know you said you're wearing you're only wearing one hat, but I think for the entrepreneurs, knowing that you have two hats is probably an advantage for us. I often try to think what would I be thinking if I'm sitting on this guy's seat, on the founder's seat now. Now I've learned to sort of try to read motivation a lot, and try to sort of decode what's in between the lines. So that's been very useful from an investor point of view, to really understand the DNA, what drives the founder, and so forth. But at the same time, it could also get dangerous, because you can get stuck in the past and say, oh, this is how I would have done it, and so on. And but business is different when I founded Zawya, right? It's different times, different environment. Things do change. There are new ways of looking at things. You need to obviously let go of that. So there is a danger of also being stuck. Right? And I have to always pinch myself that it was a long time ago when I was sort of building a company. You said something interesting, digging into the motivation. Two questions. One, how do you do it? And then I'll get to the second question.
Really, it's obviously these are not direct questions. I think the worst thing you could do is ask the entrepreneur what's your
motivation. That you're going to get the canned response.
Absolutely, it's sort of like you need to do the dance, so to speak, right? You need to dance around the subject and understand how he or she feels about this or that, or and it takes time. You can't if you ask that question directly to hope to get a direct response, yeah, you'll get it in 5 seconds, but it's got nothing to do with the truth. So it's situational, and it won't happen from the first meeting. You need several meetings until you kind of construct something in your head that you're comfortable with.
And typically on that specific pillar, let's call it motivation, what are you looking for?
Yeah, I mean, look, the most I think one of the most successful things that or say the most successful founders tend to be driven by something bigger than obviously personal gains and the personal agenda. The urge to solve a problem that is itching them, if you like, and especially if it's a problem that has a wide sort of widespread, and so empathy there is very important, right? This is a person who have identified a need that is it exists truly out there, but may not be articulated or present, and that's obviously the most valuable. These guys end up to build the most valuable startup because identifying a need that is true and present across the masses are yet not very very clear is where the opportunity lies actually. So empathy is important. Motivation is to have to build something good, useful, solve real problems. That because that will basically. So the reason for that is not only because this will potentially end up big, but also it de-risks the journey, right? So entrepreneurship journey is a tough one. It bends and it goes up and down all the time. There's a lot of bumps. We all know that. So the trick is to have a driver or a guy that is not going to give up, and obviously can go through these humps and these walls and pick himself up when things go down, because things will go down. And so if you don't have the right motivation for that, there are times you're more likely to throw the towel at early signs of difficulties and challenges, right? So you do need to have very sort of grounded reason for doing this. Yeah. Another thing that I found quite sort of encouraging is if that person actually enjoys the act of doing this, right? Building this product, or if it's in media, writing this, or building or producing this content. So there are founders who really love what they're doing, not so much caring about the real what is it doing, the impact, but they actually like what they're doing. And I always think that if you really like what you're doing, the economic thing is not so important. A lot of other things is sort of drop on the side. If you keep doing what you like doing, you will get good at it. And if you get good at it, you'll stand out, and eventually you'll break through. So that's another thing. There has to be a it's either or, and of course if you hit both these bases, that's even better.
Yeah. And when you, as an investor, when you're looking at I guess before that, there's this idea of persistence when is the right time, and is there a right time for an entrepreneur to say, screw it, it's time to throw in the towel? Because the other side of that is, if I continue to persist, the idea I have right now may not be the right one, but if I persist, there's going to be some gem that shows up, and within that gem there may be an opportunity.
Yeah.
So from your perspective, having been being an investor, having been a founder, is there a right time to throw in the towel?
It's the wrong guy to ask, because I never threw the towel. I did, actually. No, that's a lie. I did in one of the ventures I started. Look, I think one of the two traits that are really important for an entrepreneur is, obviously, the first one is you need to have a very open mind and listening all the time and getting feedback, and for that you need to be humble, of course, right? But at the same time, you need to be very persevering, and especially if you have a strong conviction.
And somewhat stubborn.
And stubborn, absolutely. And these two things don't go, they're like the opposite. And
100%.
And they say opposite traits make people, this is what greatness are made of, right?
Yeah.
The two sides.
The balance of the two.
Well, I would argue it's not the balance, it's actually, going back to your point, when do you throw the towel? It's when to use which, when to listen, and when to stand your ground, right? So there is the right time to do that, and be very, very stubborn about certain aspect of what you're doing. And there's the other times when I'm going to listen to the feedback, and I'm going to listen to what my team is telling me, what my investors are telling me, right? And it's that balance. Well, so that careful
dance.
Yes, it is. It is absolutely. It is. It's a very, very interesting process that people go through as an entrepreneur goes through.
Yeah. And I feel like with time, as an entrepreneur, just through experiences, and you reflect on it, you realize, shit, that was the time I should have listened, versus been stubborn.
100%.
And so you start to develop that instinct where I actually need to listen.
Yeah.
And I think this hits on something I started thinking a lot about a year ago, this whole idea of intellectual humility, right? Which is being very switched on, but then also having the humility to understand that because I'm switched on, my core driver to get at the best answer and the best outcome far exceeds my desire to be correct.
Yeah.
And
so that's the inner struggle.
Yeah.
And it's tough.
Yeah.
It's because you do need to have a good level of your ego has to be. You have to have a certain level of ego that is healthy, but beyond that,
becomes harmful.
Yeah, because your ears will stop working. You will switch off your ears, and you will stop taking feedback, which means and when you stop taking feedback, you stop developing, you stop learning, which means you're not progressing. And that's exactly when things start to slow down and probably snap.
Yeah. And I would argue it's even, or I'd kind of double down on what you're saying and say that it's not only receiving feedback. As the business matures, if I think about Bayzat's own journey, as the business has matured beyond a certain stage, there's only a handful of people in the region who can advise on the things they've learned along the way. And so at times I feel I've had to actually go out and actively seek feedback from maybe sometimes people even outside of the region. So I think it's, to your point about the humility and the listening, it's not just being passive about it, it's almost being proactive about it.
Absolutely.
And going out and finding people that you can talk to who've been there, done that, who can shed some light on different areas.
We're having this discussion from time to time inside STV, about personal growth, and that's something we care a lot about, for every one of us and inside the team as well. And I keep saying, we are obsessed at looking at growth companies. We study growth very carefully. How fast, how variable, how predictable the growth is, and there's a lot of attributes.
Yeah.
And you go into details, but I think we should also, which is great, right? Because we want to invest in these systems or these companies, or these engines, if you like. But when it comes to investing in ourselves, we should also have a similar sort of mindset. Like, what is driving our growth? Are we growing? And it's not just your title and your role in an organization. I'm talking about personal growth. I'm talking about the ability when you talk about humility and being patient and being sort of more positive thinking and all those things. Personal growth should be our number one agenda.
Yeah.
So yeah, you need to be proactive about that. Absolutely. Yeah.
And when you look at entrepreneurs today or investments, so it sounds like motivation of the entrepreneurs is one factor. How would you bucketize what you're looking for?
Bucketize as in motivation versus something else, or within
in terms of we're going to do this deal. Sounds like one of the factors you look at is the entrepreneur themselves.
Yeah.
What are the other factors you look at in terms of deciding whether or not you're going to invest?
Yeah. So look, I mean, the VC mindset should be one that says, okay, here's an engine that is going somewhere. It has all kind of dangers ahead and risks and challenges, but let's ask ourselves what could go right. Right. So the natural thing, the conventional sort of investment thinking is risk management, right? What could go wrong? Oh, this is, have they managed this risk? Have they managed that risk? Are they prepared in situations like so? But if you want to be a true VC, I think you need to think, yeah, there's all these things, but what can go right? Yeah. And if the answer to that is worthwhile, then yeah, put the bet, with as much, preparation as you can, but you cannot cover all bases for sure. And then just, enjoy the journey.
Yeah.
So yeah, what could go right it can be translated into a lot of stuff, right? How big ultimately this thing is going to be.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Both in terms of how much it will impact the region or the sort of the ecosystem or the societies, and then of course that translates into financially how big this business is going to be, and then ultimately, of course, the question needs to be answered in, how much can I exit this for? Because then you do the calculations on the return and so forth, which is it has to be done. Financial returns has to also be met. Yeah.
So if we kind of rewind back to the beginning, and you had to kind of self-assess now that you have your investor hat on, and you had to assess Ihsan as the founder of Zawya, and you look back on it. Let's start with motivation. Why did you feel like you had to start Zawya?
So there was so I started Zawya in London when I was an investment banker. I was covering the Middle East, and there was a clear gap of business information, professional business information that professionals, investors can rely on, day in, day out. So I did it because of a problem that I suffered from as someone who was covering the Middle East out of London. And it turned out to be, yes, it's a common problem that people across the region or professional business people suffered from. So we built that platform, and we served thousands of companies and thousands of professionals. But it was obviously a limited problem. It's not, I did not solve communication problem or like a WhatsApp did, for example, right?
Yeah.
So it's all, it very much, so my empathy, I would say back then, it was limited to my environment, people, to myself and the people like me. I did not empathize with people suffering from health problems, or you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So and there you go. I solved the problem. It was a limited problem. Nevertheless, it was a problem, and we got rewarded for it. But again, it's size and reward sort of go hand in hand.
And what was the step between I'm solving a problem for myself as an investment banker to holy smokes, this is the real business?
Yeah. Well, look, actually from day one, I did the research and said and found out that people shared that people of my background shared the same problem. And so similar business models were built in the US, and you get to learn from those quickly. And so, it wasn't too difficult to then come up with a solution that would apply to this part of the world, of course, with different nuances and different challenges. It wasn't iterative in that sense, right? It was very much, research based. Let's find out how big this problem is. Is it common amongst that user base? And the solution is very much done before, but obviously we applied it to different contexts, different region.
And what gave you the conviction to leave what you were doing, or maybe conviction is the wrong word? What made you decide at the end of the day, I'm going to leave?
Brave to leave my career in investment banking.
I mean, in those days, investment banking was also
Absolutely.
the sexiest job to be in.
In London it was.
And in London,
Yes, absolutely. So I had conviction that this is a problem worth solving. I think I always had an affinity with the region. Wanted to do something more for this part of the world. I don't know for the right reason or not, but I did it anyway. So I always felt a sense of doing something for, back home, so to speak. While I grew up in England, but I always felt an affinity to the Arab world. And of course, I can't lie and not have the internet back then. This is Web 1.0, right? Was sexy, right? So, entrepreneurs as a role or as a career became sexy from the early days of Yahoo, if you like, and
pre.com bust.
Yes, yeah. Absolutely. We started before 2000, just before 2002. The bust came in 2000, actually.
It's right after. And so you moved out here, or did you start in London?
Yeah, no, we started in London actually. We raised the money in London. The first seed capital, the first $1 million was raised in London, and then after the bust, we then started talking to investors from the region and got interest out of here. But it made sense to be near to the investors, and they said, look, if you're gonna cover the region really well, you might as well move down here. So we did. We lowered the cost. At the time, it was a lower cost, believe it or not, and it worked out nicely. It definitely paid to be closer to the clients and the customer base and so forth.
I'd imagine fundraising in almost 20 years ago looked very different
100%,
than today.
Yeah. So in good and in good ways and in bad ways, right? So when you think about today, like 20 years ago, there was no no such thing as investment decks or if you like data.
There wasn't even VCs.
Absolutely. There was everyone was onto business plans, right? Which are now like absolute no-goes. So you need to have the business plan. You'd be lucky to put together what's called an information memorandum. It was very much like investment banking type of stuff, right? But there was a lot of hype as well. The Web 1.0, and you read about it. It was very hyped, and hence the crash that came afterwards. So raising money was at the back of very little. I mean, I remember we raised the first $1 million at the back of, again, a business plan, no website, within 10 days. And
it's not so bad.
I reached out to some of my friends saying, "Look, I'm doing this, and I've got a plan, and do you want to put your money, ahlan wa sahlan." So it was, and then I remember even after the 10 days, there were more money came in, which I had to say no to because we wanted to stay disciplined and say, at this valuation, I'm only raising $1 million at this valuation. So that was one of the problems we made earlier on. But took that $1 million, built a little company out of London, created, built a website, got traffic, and then moved here and raised the second round.
And I guess building an internet company back then in the region was definitely, you were at the forefront of the technology revolution even before it started in this part of the world.
Absolutely, it was a bit pioneering back then. There was us and maybe 2 other websites. Actually, 3 other websites. 1 did not survive. 2 did not survive, and 1 did. So there was
the other one being Bait, or
Bait, exactly. Okay. So there was us, Bait, Arabia.com, which did not survive the horizontal portal, which was it was supposed to be the Yahoo of the Middle East, and there was. Can't even remember it.
I was going to say.
I can't remember the name. Those guys switched off the light much earlier. Maktub was there as well, by the way, but it was just an email service at the time, hence the name Maktub. But they turned themselves into Yahoo very smartly later on.
And when you're building a business like this, pre-exit, there's no ecosystem.
Yeah.
And so what's your plan? Are you building this because you feel like there's a real problem? You've raised money from investors who obviously expect some sort of liquidity event.
Right.
Are you even thinking about that kind of stuff early on in the journey, or it's an afterthought?
Yeah, it wasn't so clear back then, by the way. It's like, what were we doing really? But again, the hype actually helped, right? Okay. So all these companies that were doing crazy IPOs, I mean, if you think we raised some money at the back of a business plan, there were companies going public at the back of nothing in the US.
Yeah.
So there were crazy times and crazy valuations.
Pets.com.
Right, exactly. Webvan, all these guys that just, promised that the world's going to look different and we're going to do this. So I think a lot of investors were, plowing in and hoping for that, for a quick, ticket to riches.
What did you learn watching the .com crash that you took away potentially to when you were building Zawya?
That, capital is scarce, although you wouldn't think it is in the last, if you've been watching it for the last few years.
Yeah.
But it is, and it's of course coming back to scarcity now. But again, in those days, capital was not scarce. It was, people were just writing checks left, right, and center. And then the crash came, and suddenly everything shut down. So, take as much capital as you can when you can. That was the first lesson I learned, of course. That's the first and the most painful lesson I learned, because when we raised the second round, we got diluted a lot, and we did a big down round, if you like. They weren't called rounds at the time, but it was it was a big dilution. But then we spent the next 10 years building ourselves out of it, and then alhamdulillah we exited with everyone making money, and it was a good return. Yeah, there's a lot of lessons now, but I mean, the other one is, of course, it takes time. It's a long journey. It's not a 2-3 year journey.
It's funny, when I jumped into the space, I was like, oh, I'm going to be doing this for 3-4 years,
right.
And then, you know, on the other side, maybe I'll retire. Yeah. And, you know, the way I talk about it with entrepreneurs who are thinking about getting into the space, or aspiring entrepreneurs, I tell them it's like a marathon, but you're always sprinting. You know, in a marathon, you have to pace yourself. This is like a sprinting marathon.
Absolutely, putting fires out and so forth. But it goes back to, you can't do it really if you don't enjoy what you're doing. So you either have to believe in it so badly, right, or you have to enjoy it. There were times when, of course, in those days before, you know, we did this down round effectively in Zawya, where I was thinking of throwing the towel, where, you know, salaries were not getting paid. We ran out of cash. You know, we went through the whole of those.
Yeah, and you know, those moments are the reason I like to have these conversations, because people see Zawya exit, Thomson Reuters. They don't see the story behind it. And so talk to me a little bit about that experience, that period in Zawya's history, where how you guys found yourself in that situation, how you navigated your way through it.
Yeah, so the original mistake, as I said, was not raising enough money, thinking that valuation will always go up. And I raised $1 million within 10 days. Imagine what can I do if I just put the website up, right?
It's funny, because when you were saying you were getting more money and you decided not to take it, I was smiling on the inside, because I was waiting for you to say, I was waiting for the moment you would tell me that in retrospect, that was a mistake.
Oh, huge. Of course. And my thinking was, very logical, right? That I'll just have to put a website and then do some, hire the team, and then I can raise the next $2 million at double the valuation. Right? Yeah. So then the crash happened, and then we ended up basically conserving cash, having to conserve cash for a longer time, to the point where, while looking for new investors, which of course got now switched off by what's happening, and the hype basically dying off. So we at the end we ended up basically, like, we were, that cash conserving process was painful, right? You write off salaries, you then you reduce salary, then you write it off for a while, and then we were probably 2-3 months from switching off the light, literally. You take on some overhead, not debt, no one will lend you, but you basically accumulated bills, basically, right? And so, we got lucky. We had a bunch of people calling us from the GCC, nice a group of investors who wanted to build something like that, and they didn't get the chance. And so, we immediately started a conversation, and we're very sort of accommodating at this point, understandingly so. We were saved at the last minute.
How do you keep a team motivated? How do you keep yourself motivated through a moment like that?
Keeping yourself motivated goes back to what's your original mission, if you like, or why you started this. So that is obviously the most important thing. If you don't keep yourself motivated, you can't motivate anyone else, and sort of sell the hope, if you like. It was myself, my co-founder, who also kept hoping for the best. We did lose people, obviously, along the way, because salaries were reduced and so forth. They're tough times, and especially when you compare your colleagues not make the jump, and they're still getting paid investment
banking salaries and bonuses.
Exactly, right? So if you believe in it, you try to just, it push all the way. When do you throw the towel? When the towel gets thrown at you. If you keep believing it. If you, of course, the minute you get signals that, hey, it doesn't make sense, and you weigh it properly in your head, then you might as well do it yourself.
And how about the team side? I mean, how do you... So obviously people, I can imagine, would leave the core team that got through it.
Yeah.
What are the things you learned along the way?
100%, yeah. So the tech, for example, the tech part was, these again were very expensive people back then because, interestingly, tech is still expensive.
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean,
they never
that hasn't changed.
And so, at kind of first sign of trouble, because we myself and the co-founder, we were not tech background. So at first sort of sign of trouble, they wobbled, and we eventually lost them. My younger brother, who was a bit tech savvy, he's an engineer. He joined earlier on, and we were lucky to have him because he moved on very fast. He learned the tricks, and he actually kept the whole thing running. And we were saved by him actually at that time. So when you look back at him, we are grateful for those, for having him on. And he joined as, again, very junior guy, but he was able to take over and save the day. Again, so then the reason he obviously did it because of the relationship, and then he believed in what we're doing, and of course he believed in the equity that he got, right? So the others, even if you give them equity, if they didn't think this is gonna be amounting to much, it doesn't make sense, right? For them.
Yeah. And then from there you go on for the next 10 plus years to build the company after that round. Yeah,
so we raised another $1.5 million, and with and again, $1.5 million back then was still a lot of money.
Yeah.
And we moved down here. We started building products that really we could sell. We could commercialize immediately, as opposed to the original plan was very much advertising driven, but advertising sort of evaporated very much after the collapse. And then we got lucky again with the region sort of economies took a real boost after the invasion of Iraq and toppling of Saddam Hussein. So security increased in the region. So investment poured in, a lot of investment poured in, and a global investment came in, and so the demand for what we're putting out there just went up. So we caught that. We were there at the right time, at the right place. We caught that wave. And we got lucky that way, built alhamdulillah, at the end we built a big business. We we got it to $18 million in revenue at the peak. This was in 2008, because then there was a crash again in 2008. And that was a big number for a startup, right? We're profitable, very profitable actually. And we got affected, of course, in the financial sort of crisis, 2008, 2009, because we're in that sector itself, and so. But we were still, we still cruised, and the business, we gave, we built it very frugally, if you like. We were very frugal. We built the right thing at the right time, learning from the top guys there. We were observing carefully what Reuters would be doing, what Bloomberg would be building, and pricing it more competitively. And again, we made sure we build a good culture for the company, with a lot of pride. We're doing this against the big boys, and we're doing it from this part of the world. We went out and built a whole sort of information center, a research center in Lebanon. I had 100 people, staffing that office. They did a wonderful job backing up all our information and all our data crunching and so forth, and served, valuable clients across the Gulf specifically, and other places like London and New York and so forth. We ended up really building a service at par with the best, to the point that they felt that they had to buy us out to get us out of the sort of rather than compete with us.
How much of rallying the troops internally and giving the team mission, purpose, cause was that factor that it's David and Goliath?
Yeah, I would say quite a bit actually. And I had to, I had to actually articulate it in that way, but not for the sake of, it was the truth, right? The people did take pride of what they're building. You could see that we were gathering more higher quality information, putting it in a way that really cares for the client. And that what helped me here was that me being again on the other side as a customer. So, we were building something that I would buy on the other side. We did not discount it. I remember going to one big sovereign wealth fund, which asked to get 20 license for 6 months trial, and then they'll think about subscribing. I said to them, I'd love to have your business, but our rules is we'll give you a 1 week trial and for a few accounts. And if you like it, great. If you don't, it's okay. They were stunned, because the Reuters and the big boys, they don't talk to them like that, right? We had to behave like big boys, and and when they push back, I say to them, look, we have mouths to feed, right? And this is not a 100-year-old company. So we had that culture, a culture of being proud of building something in here from here for this region, we try to very much be an equalitarian sort of environment where people just deserve the best, so to speak, right?
How did you, when you look back on it, how did you localize what you were doing versus the big boys who were trying to penetrate the region? What were some of the things you did that helped you win?
So as a startup, you're more agile than the incumbent, right? You have less processes, you have less, regulation, if you like, internal regulations and so on. So you can move fast and break things and then correct them. So that gives you an edge always, right? And then it's the focus, right? So the leaders in the organization, if they wake up and care about that particular thing, where your focus is, energy flows. It's a well-known thing. You focus on something, that's where energy flows, and that's where the things moves and get done. And that's it. Our focus was limited, obviously, to this part of the world, as opposed to, it's nice to have. This part of the world was nice to have for the big boys, right? This was our bread and butter. This is everything we did. So, we did it with a passion, with a lot of energy. And we moved faster, we built faster. And then we priced better. And people appreciated it, the customer appreciated it.
What would you have done differently, looking back at your time growing Zawya?
I would have probably managed the investors better, because it did come to a point in when you either continue with me, and keep redefining the platform, or I step off the bus. it didn't have to be that way. I should have probably invested more in the relationship, and I could have probably guided them to go further. But at the same time, when you take on a financial investor, they do have a time horizon, so they cannot keep. The
Going
founder,
with you forever.
right? The founder wants to go on forever. Not all founders do, but some do. And so you need to be aware of that not everyone will stay with you on the bus, right? It's your baby, but people come along with you to help you and to support, but not forever, right?
And then when the business ends up exiting, I haven't gone to that point, so now I'm just imagining that it becomes very difficult to say, cool, this thing I've been investing a large percentage of my life into is now gone, and so now I need to find another purpose. What is that experience like?
Yeah, there was a little bit of a denial at the beginning. This
so
is
you
when
went through the different stages of grief.
Yes, we did. Some parts I handled well, some parts I didn't. I had a very during that time, I think, I had a very supportive wife, which really put up with me during these. There were difficult years, but thank God we came through it.
Which is crazy, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of entrepreneurs like, once you exit, khalas, now you're relaxed. And I talk to entrepreneurs who've gone to that point, and they're like, it was a really tough time.
No, because if you had a baby that you've been growing for 10 years, and then suddenly you need to reorient yourself and have a new purpose, as you said, and it just doesn't come like that. Okay, you have money in the bank, but it depends. I mean, you're beyond that. You're beyond buying this fancy car or going to this going to a fancy property or holiday. You're beyond that, right? So,
which is crazy, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs early in the journey,
they start that way.
They start thinking that there's a pot of gold at the end of this, right? Yeah. And then when entrepreneurs get to that point, a lot of them say it's not about that. But if you rewind back to the beginning of the journey, the financial incentive is a meaningful percentage of why you do this. But I feel like as you get closer to the finish line, it becomes a smaller percentage.
Absolutely. Look, you grow, right? I mean, 10 years is a long time. You grow and you change, and your priorities change, and your thinking changes. And there's this, what is it called? The hedonic adaptation. Right? You adapt to things, right? The fancy car no longer, does it for you, and or this or that does not do it for you. So,
the way you define success, how has that changed over time, if at all?
I mean, obviously, 100% of the early days, it was material success. It was a career success in terms of status and so on. But, I think, alhamdulillah, I got lucky with the right guidance, that it is more about you can have as much money as you want, as much status as you want, but if there's no inner peace, inner peace is the word. I don't want to call it inner happiness. Then you haven't achieved anything, quite frankly. So it is the inner struggle, and it is the struggle to grow yourself, right? The struggle to be patient, and to react at the right time, and to not to react at the right time, and to defend with all you have, and jump, and fight for what it's worth, and to let go of. So all these things. So for me today, what's success? If you go back to your question, it's me looking at myself as a better person than I was 10 years ago, and it's a giving process. So the ultimate way to do this is to give, and to give, with all you have, whether it's your time, whether it's money, whether it's your reputation. The more you give, the more you will actually rise, and you will you will cleanse yourself, and you purify yourself. And that's that feeling, that emotion that now that's I'm in pursuit of that emotion of being in that status at all time, as much as possible. I succeed sometimes, I fail a lot of the times, but it's an ongoing process.
That's amazing to hear kind of the evolution. How do you advise entrepreneurs who've reached that exit point? How do you suggest they go about finding their second act, their purpose, from what you learned through that process?
I think so one thing when I look back and I regret is I've never had a mentor at an early stage, right? So I very much try to do things on the go and do it my way and so on. And so I think having a mentor with you that you trust along the path, and wherever that path takes you, is a great tool, and it's effectively gives you a mirror image to yourself, so that you keep taking the right decisions, whether you want to blow all your money that you got on the beach, or go and build the next thing, or give it to people who are in need. These are important decisions, but ultimately it goes down to what you're trying to optimize for, and to have a mentor with you that you trust, who becomes your mirror effectively, is useful, because then you will not be in a sort of an echo chamber, and you live in a sort of like an imaginary world. The thing is, you need to be real and true to yourself, and only then that's your way of achieving inner peace. Whether you build $1 billion company, or whether you you go on just helping people, and so it doesn't matter what you do, as long as you put yourself on a path for growth, personal growth, and achieving personal peace. I think that's important.
And from my perspective, listening to today's conversation, there's quite a few things I heard and took away. First of all, you said entrepreneurs who have kind of this urge, conviction to solve a problem that's bigger than just money, solving for personal growth, or the entrepreneurs you believe are in it for the right reasons. And I think that's very important, because I think a lot of entrepreneurs try to solve for the exit. I liked a lot the conversation we had around the struggle, let's call it, between listening and humility versus stubbornness and persistence. I think that's a very important one. I've learned the hard way, or someone told me earlier, around taking as much capital as you can when you can. I think it's good advice in this economic environment as well. I've started to spend a lot more time thinking about what you mentioned around inner peace. And I like how, having been there, done that, the conclusion you've kind of come to after all this success, mashallah, is without inner peace, you don't have success. And having a mentor is a great tool to just develop and grow yourself. And honestly, the conversation took a lot of different directions, and I love that. And so I want to say thank you a lot for taking the time to have the conversation. It's been a true pleasure and an honor, honestly, to speak to one of the forefathers of the tech ecosystem. So thank you for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. And yeah, you managed to get a lot of things out of me.
I told you.
I hope I didn't confuse you. But,
Awesome. Thank you very much.